short, minor one as a palate cleanser from the real bad horror stories here. My DM makes us roll a history check for our characters' memories. Hey DM, it's been a few sessions and I can't recall. What was the name of the NPC's daughter again? Roll a history check. It's been 3 weeks for us, the players, but it's only been like half an hour for my character. He would know this easily. Oh, well, we'll see. Roll a history check. For added context, I was an avid note-taker even before this, but now I'm having to basically write down everything he says because I'll never know when my character will potentially forget how to breathe due to a bad roll. The extra crappy thing about this is his stenographer taking me out of the game while I scramble to make sure that I have everything down. In case you're a DM like this, per the player's handbook, your intelligence history checks measure your ability to recall lore about historical events, legendary people, ancient kingdoms, past disputes, recent wars, and lost civilizations. Not, does the character remember how to tie their shoes or who their father was? Given the numerous times I casually remind my players of past lore events when they ask, I cannot even imagine the chaos that adding this mechanic into my campaign would cause. The sheer amount of lost memories, they would be beyond count. We all have that one player from time to time. For us, that player was Chris. Decent guy, but horrible at the table. He was the guy that would literally wander off in-game at the very beginning of the session. Like, as in, first sentence of the campaign. Alright, you're all sitting in a tavern, and you start hearing several patrons crying about their kidnapped children. He interrupts. Doesn't sound like something my character cares about. I leave town and head north. Or the time it was a futuristic game, and they were part of a mercenary company, very elite, sent on a reconnaissance mission to analyze which of 2 rival factions to join. They found a train carrying prisoners from one group, and power armor from the other faction was on the train. Perfect chance for some roleplay, information gathering, maybe even some sleight of hand. Nope, he decides to blow up the whole train, getting all personnel on both sides killed and getting their entire merc company blacklisted, then attacked by his own prior employer when he was fired. Surprising that this character is not the villain of the story, he was just introduced to us. And for some idiotic reason, even after his behavior, he asked my girlfriend at the time to run a game for him, myself, one of my other friends, and 2 of his friends, Jay and Lee. So we all agree on Rifts, older magic/tech game, and my girlfriend sinks hours into building a campaign. It should be noted that while we were prepping characters, Jay ran a one-shot so we could all see if we got along, and we seemed to. Plus, this dude, Chris's friend, seemed like a pretty decent DM. Anyway, we start the longer campaign, and the first 2 hours go okay. Now Chris, Lee, and Jay are all min-maxers, while my friend and I were just trying to build solid characters. We get through a combat or 2, and Lee's character in particular is just mopping the floor with everything. This is a pretty powerful system, with even level 1 characters having building leveling abilities, so at first it doesn't seem so crazy. However, by the 3rd combat, something is wrong. Lee's character is shrugging off tank shells, plasma blasts, punches from robots, and he's not taking any damage, at least according to Lee. My girlfriend, the GM, already annoyed with having to babysit Chris as normal, and now this, turned to Chris's buddy Lee. Okay, you're gonna need to explain how your character is doing so much damage and is so resistant. He just looks at her and says, no. Now, we've been gaming for years, and maybe it's just my group, but this is so far out of left field and etiquette that myself, my friend, and the GM just kinda get startled for a minute. Yes? She finally says. I don't need to tell you that, he continues. Finally thinking she figured the problem out, she says, oh, I get it. You have abilities you want to keep from the party, I understand. We can step outside for a minute. No, I'm not gonna do that either. Then just give me your character sheet. No! I've never seen this level of disrespect to a GM. My girlfriend is starting to tear up just from the rage. Chris, Lee, and Jay are all laughing at this exchange. In addition to being rude, how the hell is a DM supposed to plan engaging encounters without knowing their abilities? Okay, then we're done, she says after a minute and starts stacking her notes and putting away her dice. They keep laughing for a minute until they realize that she is serious. This was their last chance to maybe back down and not ruin everyone's night, but nope, Lee mutters something under his breath, which we probably were better off not hearing, and the group packed up and left. Never played with any of those 3 again. I know they kept playing, Chris wasn't actually a bad dude, and he's a friend of mine, just hated being at the table with him, but it was a long time before my girlfriend was ever willing to GM again. Always remember, your GM is running this game. They're putting time and effort into making it happen. So, if you try to make fun of them and laugh at them while they're running the game, don't be shocked when they decide not to continue running the game. This GM was asking for something completely normal. I do so all the time. My player says that they have a high damage roll, and I ask them to do the math for me. It's not because I don't believe them, I just want to check. And every time, they just do the math for me, and every time, it checks out, because I have good players, thank God. Unfortunately for this GM, she did not have good players, and instead, they just decided to laugh at her for doing her job? I wish her good fortune in finding a group that doesn't completely suck. So I express interest in joining a 5th edition play-by-post game, and months later, I get a message saying the other people they picked didn't work out, and asking if I'm still interested. I'm like, sure, that sounds great. The game master stresses this reason. They weren't proactive enough and didn't post as frequently as we'd like. Not a problem for me, no sir. First post when I joined, the DM hands us a puzzle, a list of spells, and a list of spell components. Pretty clearly what you need to do is draw lines between the matching spells and spell components. I looked it up after the fact, it's in Tasha's, find it if you want. So people start throwing out guesses for spells they know, and people cover all the ones I got. So I take 2 shots in the dark, 2 logical guesses for spells and their components. And then, I get a private message from the GM. Please remove the second guess. Someone else will be sharing that information. I'm confused by this and express so. I'm just trying to get everyone to share what they know first. Well, isn't that kind of like up to the players? Yes, exactly. What I mean is, whether or not we guess or just say what we know right away is kind of up to the players to decide amongst themselves. Not for the GM to step in and tell us what order our characters share information in, or is that wrong? You're understanding it wrong, yes. You could easily list everything as a reasonable guess and say it's not up to the DM but the character, but no, we don't do it that way. So yes, it's wrong because we want everyone to participate. Me throwing out a guess with no substantiation doesn't lock anyone else out of participating or sharing their thoughts, but alright, I say to the DM. Suddenly, I'm ejected from the server, which has most of my character notes and musings with the GM, so that's lost, I guess, and get one more message in private. I don't think we're going to work out. Thank you for your time. Then I am immediately unfriended or blocked and can no longer message that user. I understand this is less being kicked for the guess and more for arguing with the GM, but that's just not quite as snappy as the post title. I feel like I've already dodged a bullet, but there were quite a few red flags in character creation as well. I mean, I'm all for player participation, but yikes. At the end of the day, the player, the OP, just threw out a couple of guesses. The GM losing their mind over it makes no sense. It is not locking other players out of participation. That's not how it works. They can still participate. The player made 2 guesses and was, to my knowledge, pretty public about the fact that they made 2 guesses. The other players are free to agree or disagree, and then you get roleplay. That's how it's supposed to work. Banning somebody because they guessed on a puzzle, well, that's a great way for you to bleed players. You cannot run a successful play-by-post game, or a successful game in general, if you kick people because they participated. Alright children, pull up a chair and let me regale you with the story of a helpful comrade and how he helped completely break a DM from wanting to play RPGs ever again. Our malcontent is not known in this story as a helpful comrade because he was helpful, though he tried to be in his own obnoxious way, but rather because this was his moniker he used across the internet. Fortunately, this moniker is no longer in use, though for a period of time it was notorious across /TG for being a generally awful human being. And one must pause to think how awful you must be if a wretched hive of scum and villainy, like 4chan, finds you displeasing to the senses. With our preamble complete, let us begin our story when an intrepid adventurer, doc-funkenstein, joined a Pathfinder game on Roll20 to play that old chestnut, Rise of the Rune Lords. Our DM was led by a DM, who we will call DM, because it makes my life easier, who had been playing D&D since the days when elves were a class and not a race. The good Doctor of Funk, having been without a game in a year, submitted to join the campaign and was accepted by the DM and jumped into the Discord and immediately met the other players. The first, a barbarian played by the DM's wife, who shall be known as the Storm. The second, a newcomer to the world of RPGs who decided to play a paladin, who we will call the Raven. The trouble began almost immediately. Our good doctor, our protagonist, decided to roll up a druid, building up a character that he had wanted to play for a while that focused primarily on buffing and supporting the party. When the doctor announced this decision, our helpful comrade decided it was his duty to live up to his name and began telling the doctor how to build the character, everything from spells to stats to feats to the race choices to how the character should be role-played. Let's be clear, it was never, "This is just a suggestion," but rather, "This is what you need to do." "It's fine," said the doctor. "He's just being helpful. He doesn't realize I've been playing since the days of Thaco." And so the doctor privately let his unhelpful advisor know that he had been playing RPGs since before our helpful comrade had been squeezed out of his mother's loathsome nether regions. The doctor appreciated the help, but he was fine. Thank you. And thus the helpful comrade turned his beady-eyed gaze onto the others who were too nice to say no. What feat should I pick?" quoth the Raven, and helpful comrade would immediately launch into an hour-long spiel of detailed lore in the world of Pathfinder, because he had read every book ever written, including the adventure module, and wouldn't it make sense if she was from the faraway land of Who Really Cares, where all this amazing stuff happened, for example? Like, once upon a time, there was this comment, yeah, that's great, but like, what feats should I pick, and how do feats work? She would quietly ask the DM and the doctor afterwards, and both would actually offer some real help. "Oh, what do you do with this choice?" Storm would inquire, and helpful comrade would tell her that her choices were all bad, and wouldn't it be cool if the two of them could roleplay some more once we had started? Wink, wink. Sure, said the Storm, because she was just too damn kind. "Okay, everyone," the DM would offer. "In this version of Galarian, where I'm running this game, we have one minor, insignificant, tiny little difference." What? How dare the DM change the lore of this world? If he's going to do that, then why bother playing in the sandbox that is Galarian at all? Okay, never mind, the DM would quickly move on, mostly wanting to just play and hoping it would get better once things got settled. And then our hero DM's eyes lit up. "Also, I've made these cool 8-bit minis and have all the battle maps done in 8-bit because it's awesome and I'm a huge fan of classic RPG games." "Cool," Storm replied. "Dude, that's awesome," the doc said. "I don't know what those refer to, I'm all new to RPGs," Raven inquired, and much like Pinter there was a pause, and the doctor braced himself, and surely enough, like Caesar, it came. "What? But that style doesn't fit with the established Galarian artwork put out by Paizo and drawn by Wayne Reynolds, who was the inspiration for everything and Well, I like it," interrupted the doc. "Me too," seconded Storm. "I don't know what's going on," quoth the Raven. "Fine, but I'm not happy." The Doctor of Funk, in his freshly sprouted druidic wisdom, decided not to press it further. Instead, he watched and ate some freshly popped popcorn. This was going to be a disaster, but he was desperate for a game. Besides, the DM and his wife were pretty cool. And so the game began, as the campaign does, in the sleepy town of Sandpoint, where a festival is taking place. It was here we are finally introduced to Helpful Comrade's character. To Helpful Comrade, it was inspired by a literary character he loved. To the rest of us, it was just a carbon copy of said character, and that's being kind. For Helpful Comrade, this knight of Galarian lore, who refused to allow any changes to printed material without whang at our DM, decided to build Gambit. You all know Gambit, the smooth-talking, womanizing, card-tossing Cajun mutant from the literary masterpiece known as the Men of X. Should you not know of Gambit, who is sometimes called Remy LeBeau, I encourage you to watch the cinematic adaptation of the Men of X called Men of X Beginnings. Hugh Jackman got paid. Let us be clear here, children. The Doctor, our protagonist, has built characters based on other works of fiction before. Almost everyone has. He has built characters based on Mad Mardigan, Iago, Hannah Munin, Walter Mitty, and so forth. There is nothing wrong with drawing inspiration from the things you love, and perhaps a Gambit could work in Galarian in the hands of someone with a little bit more tact. But this character of our comrade, he was the exact same character as Gambit, down to the bad Creole accent. But that isn't the problem. You see, if you know Gambit, you know one of his primary traits is that he likes women. A lot. And so, Helpful Comrade set his sights on one such woman and tried to help himself into her pants. Unfortunately for all involved, it was the DM's wife, the Storm. The Storm decided to go along with it for now, for the sake of the game, and because she is such a genuinely nice person, and so she roleplayed her heart out as Gambit gambited away his crappy Creole accent, his deck of playing cards used as a weapon, and his inability to look at anyone else but women. Meanwhile, in the home of the DM and the wife, the two of them exchanged glances and had a quick check-in with each other, but decided to roll with it for now. It was just role-playing, and that's what we were here for, after all. Romance in RPGs is not unheard of. It's a little weird to begin romancing someone on session 1, but okay, sure, let's see what happens. That flag waving in the breeze looks like it is maroon, not quite red. Everything will be probably fine. And then came Session 2, where the Doctor and the Raven were unable to do much of anything other than gaze longingly at the spotlight that was firmly upon Helpful Combat's Gambit clone and his attempt to get into the Barbarian's pants. The Doctor quietly put on an episode of X-Files and munched on some popcorn while waiting for the scene to transition away from Helpful Comrade, who even Miss Piggy would call a spotlight hog. The DM, that day, resolved to talk to Helpful Comrade outside of the game, but did not want to cause a scene in the middle of a session. Meanwhile, as the hours went by, the good doctor began to get annoyed. Partly because of the nonsense on X-Files, and partly because he was getting barely a chance to play. Plot threads were there, and the Doctor was picking them up, as was Storm. The Raven, new to this world of RPGs, would follow along confusedly, but Helpful Comrade refused to pick up the plot points because they didn't involve getting into Storm's pants. A Discord conversation ensued. As this was years ago, children, the following is paraphrased. The DM, are you not going into the house? I don't have any motivation to do so. There's screams of help coming from within. Yeah, but my character wouldn't do that. You need to motivate me to do that. Right now, there's not much my character would do. At this point, the good doctor was no longer feeling the funk. At this point, the Doctor of Funk was no longer feeling the funk. Doctor. Okay, then why are you playing him? What do you mean? I mean, you said you knew this campaign pretty well and you read the books beforehand. Why would you make a character who doesn't want to be part of the campaign? That's not my job. What? That's the DM's job. He has to make me want to follow the plot. Okay, what do you need to follow the plot? Okay, let's just call the session for tonight. A day or two passed, and the Discord chat was quiet. And then, the Doc, our protagonist, got a private message from our beleaguered DM, who was in a state of both disbelief and anger. It seems that the DM took some time out of his busy life to try and talk to unhelpful comrade about things, like adults do, but it felt like talking to a brick wall, because DM was a good person, so he kept trying, and trying, and trying. And trying, until finally our exhausted DM believed he had gotten through to our helpful comrade. And then, a little while later, our favorite wannabe Gambit messaged Storm for some out-of-game roleplay, and dear children, you know what that means. With our DM staring over her shoulder in shock, a horrified Storm, the DM's wife, shut down Helpful Comrade's attempt to cyber her character in a private chat. Helpful Comrade apologized again and again, saying, "It was my character, that was just role-playing." And so in an attempt to clear the air like mature adults, a Discord conversation started up, with a request to talk about issues with everyone together and to find solutions. DM quickly asked, "Okay, let's gloss over romantic relationships for now and focus on the narrative because—" "What? But my character!" "Well, some people have complained that it is taking focus away from the game." I'm just role-playing. Who complained? I don't think anyone did. Who complained about me? I want to face my accuser. The Storm was quiet because she, A, had enough, B, did not want to cause a scene, and C, had enough. And honestly, who could blame her? And that is where the DM punted him from the game, and the Doctor, the Storm, and the DM all breathed a sigh of relief while the Raven looked on in confusion. Another player was quickly recruited, someone who the Doctor still plays with to this day, and so we attempted to pick up where we left off, quietly forgetting Helpful Comrade and his Gambit were ever part of this world, trying to cyber the DM's wife. But dear children, with the wawing of the Helpful Comrade, we had overlooked another problem. And we got back to gaming, and as the DM asked us to roll a die, a voice in the darkness spoke. How do I roll a dice?" quoth the Raven, "but that is a story for another— Nope! No, sir, no thank you. Given how long it took me to finish this story, I'm sorry. I just do not like it when the OP insists on using these strange names. Just call them by their classes, pretty please. Unless you're Loverboy XXX. That guy gets to keep his name. Okay, though, in all seriousness, the writing of the story is not a big deal. The OP in this case told a very important tale, and there are lessons to take from this. Our helpful comrade definitely plays in a way that is absolutely terrible. First and foremost, you need to make sure everyone is comfortable at the table when it comes to romances. That is a big part of making sure romance works at your game, because if you don't make sure everyone's comfortable, rest assured, it will all fall apart very quickly. You need to talk to people about this kind of thing is the point, especially if some people at the table have an already established relationship in real life. Also, forcing people to play a character in a certain particular way, not cool. Doesn't matter how experienced the person is, whether they're experienced or inexperienced, it's not nice to tell people, you need to roleplay your character in this specific way, because it's completely taking away their agency, and that kind of freedom is a big part of why we play D&D. Unless they're ruining the game with their choices, don't force them to do anything. Final thing, player motivation. This guy complained about the DM not motivating the character properly, and we have talked about this before. You need to make your character, at least loosely, to fit into the campaign that you are playing in. It is your responsibility to create a character that works with the party and works with the campaign, and if you create a character that doesn't have any motivation to do anything, then yeah, that question that the OP asked is quite pertinent. Why are you playing this character at all? Alright, and that is going to be it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then we also have a Tabletop Tavern Tips series where I go over general tips for both DMs and players. You can check it out in the cards, and while you're there, you can subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Suddenly Gambit to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.